Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Jiyae Hwang. I am a senior associate at Scott Legal PC. Today, we're going to spend some time talking about the diversity visa. Some of you may be curious about this particular pathway for a green card, which can be a great opportunity for some people. Now, before we get started on the main presentation, just a few housekeeping details to share with you. So Scott Legal is a full-service immigration law firm, which means we do have expertise handling a wide variety of visa categories suited for various circumstances. So whatever your immigration needs may be it a family-based, employment-based, or investment-based immigration matter, and including the diversity visa, we can definitely help you find a solution that works for you. We will be continuing this webinar series. We do offer at least 2 webinars a month on a variety of different immigration law topics, so please feel free to follow us and sign up for additional webinars that are coming up. At the end of this particular webinar, we will be sending out a few things to all participants. First, we will send you a copy of the PowerPoint that has all of the information covered in this webinar. Second, we will send you a comprehensive guide to the diversity visa which is a booklet of information that you can use as a reference. We will also send you a link that you can follow where you can sign up for the additional webinars coming up in the future that I have mentioned, and also a link to this webinar as it will be recorded. This webinar will also be made available on YouTube, and we do encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the notification button, as we do regularly upload a variety of helpful immigration law related videos. Finally, we will send you a link that you can follow to set up a consultation with one of our experienced attorneys should you wish to explore this option further in your particular case. So today we are very lucky to have Michaela, who is a senior associate at Scott Legal with a wealth of experience in the diversity visa, and we will be speaking about this today. Finally, if you have any particular questions, please feel free to add them to the chat box or use the Q&A function to ask your question, and we will try and get to all questions. So without further ado, I will now turn it over to Michaela.
Thank you very much, Jiyae, and good afternoon, everyone. So why don't we get started with the diversity visa green card. So, the diversity visa green card is a green card that is available to nationals of certain countries. So, not all countries throughout the world participate in the program. Basically, how this program works is that the US government selects certain countries that have historically low immigration to the US, and then natives of these countries can apply for a green card, through the diversity visa lottery program. So how does this program work? So basically in fall of each year, the government opens this online lottery system for a certain period of time, and you can go online on the government website and submit your diversity visa lottery entry in the lottery. Then the lottery closes. And then usually it's in April or May of each year, the government runs the diversity visa lottery and selects people in the lottery who then will have option to apply for the diversity visa lottery green card. So, this year, the government released the results in May of 2024. And then what's important to keep in mind here is that, how can you find out that you were selected in the program? So the government doesn't, send out notifications to the people who were selected. When you apply for, through the lottery program, you have to keep your a unique confirmation number. So this is really important, just keep it somewhere. And then, then you can check on the government website. Again, as I said, it's usually in May of each year. You would just input the number, certain information, and then you can see the status, whether you were selected or no. Another important thing is that, like let's say that in May of 2024, you check the status, it says that you were selected. So what does this mean? So this means that you were selected, and you will be able to apply for a green card in the next fiscal year. So, the fiscal year starts, for this year, it would start October 1st, 2024. And it will finish on September 30, 2025. So, like right now we are, in June of 2024. So right now the government is still kind of like adjudicating the diversity visa lottery green cards for, like this fiscal year. So really, to be able to kind of like apply, you will need to wait until, like the next fiscal year starts. Then, another thing to keep in mind is that, the selection in the green card lottery, it doesn't mean that, like you are, like you will get the green card. So, like just because you were selected, it doesn't mean that, the government will kind of like automatically mail you a green card, like you'll have to go through a certain process. And also, the government each year, they select kind of more applicants. So 55,000 people every year can get the diversity visa lottery green card, but the government always selects more applicants than the 55,000. Just because, like not all people, like end up applying or qualifying. So they always kind of like select more people. So, like just because you were selected in the lottery, like doesn't mean that you will automatically get the green card. You have to be proactive, like file as soon as possible. You have to meet the requirements, and then, if you meet all the requirements and file in time, then you will be able to get the green card. So, so how can you kind of like figure out like when in the fiscal year you will be able to file? So on the selection notice, like when you go on the government website, you input the case number, there will be kind of like a generated letter you can download from the system. And this letter will have your kind of, information. And one information it contains is your unique case number. And, the case number will start with certain letters. So these, the letters usually kind of like mean, like which kind of like which country in the world, or like which, like continent in the world are you applying from? And then it will contain like unique numbers. So, like let's say, for example, that you are a national of, like let's say, for example, Ukraine. So that would be under the category of Europe. And then it would have kind of like a certain number, and that would be your unique number. And we'll kind of discuss, like what the number means in more detail on one of the next slides. Perfect. So now let's move on and discuss, what are the diversity visa lottery requirements, and whether you qualify. So, really kind of like the only two important requirements you have to meet is that you have to be a native of one of the listed countries that kind of participate in the DV lottery for, like that particular year. So what does native mean? So it means that either, like you were born in this country, or, or your spouse was born in this country, and you were married with the spouse before you submitted the DV lottery entry. So, as I said, like not all countries, like in the world kind of like, participate in the program. So countries that have kind of historically, like high immigration to the US, such as, for example, India, China, Canada, those those don't participate, but many other countries do. So if you were either born in one of these countries, or your spouse was born there and you were married before you submit the entry, like you could apply under that country. And one thing to keep in mind is that, like let's say that you were born in one of these countries, and then later in your life you got citizenship of another country, that's fine. Like as long as you were born in the country that kind of participates in the program, like that's fine, and you will still be able to apply as a native of that country. And then the second important requirement is that you have to have at least high school education. So this means this is defined in the regulations as successful completion of a formal course of elementary and secondary education that is comparable to a 12-year course in the US. And, you know, like, let's say that you do not meet this requirement, you know, like you didn't finish the high school, then you could still qualify through your work experience, and you would just have to show that you have at least 2 years of qualifying work experience in the 5 years in an occupation which by the Department of Labor requires at least 2 years of training. So this is kind of a second, you know, important requirement that you have to meet. And, you know, like you should really kind of assess whether you meet these requirements, like before you even submit the DV entry. You know, so this doesn't kind of like become an issue at the interview stage, because, you know, like let's say that you don't meet it, and then you come to the interview, you know, it's really, you know, the consular officer or the USCIS would not be able to approve the application because you don't meet the requirements. So it's important to kind of assess this before you even submit the DV entry. Perfect. Now let's move on, you know, and discuss whether your family can apply for a green card with you. So yes, you know, the short answer is yes. Your spouse and then your children under the age of 21 can apply for a green card with you. It's really important to kind of list your spouse, and if you have children, your children on the DV entry, because like let's say that you were married at the time and you had 2 children at the time you submitted the entry, but for some reason you didn't list them there. You know, this would disqualify you from kind of like the ability to get the green card. So it's really important, if you are married, if you have children, to list them in the DV entry, and then they can apply with you. Now, let's say that you submitted the DV entry, you know, like you were married, and then you submitted it, like, let's say November, and then, you know, in May, you found out you were selected, and then you had a baby in July. You know, it would be possible still to kind of like include you know, your child in the application after the fact, and so that's fine. And also, you know, like let's say that you get married after you got selected in the lottery or after you submitted the entry, and the marriage is bona fide, you know, the spouse could also apply with you. So so that's fine. Perfect. So now let's kind of talk a little bit more about your, you know, your case number, and kind of like how to figure out when during the fiscal year you'll be able to file the application. So, you know, so when the fiscal year starts, which is October, the government will be releasing a Visa Bulletin every month, and it will kind of, the government will release, you know, like certain numbers in the Visa Bulletin for the DV applicants. So this is like a sample, you know, like this is a Visa Bulletin for DV applicants from October 2023. So let's just go briefly through it and kind of discuss what this means. So, you know, like let's say that you, you know, you got selected and you are a native of one of the countries in Africa, and your, you know, your case number is 8,500. So, you know, like when the Visa Bulletin gets released in October 2024, you know, like you will be, or, you know, usually they kind of release the Visa Bulletin kind of like, they would release the October Visa Bulletin like mid-September usually. So like when the October starts, you'll be kind of able to file early in the month. So, you know, like, let's say that mid-September, they release this Visa Bulletin, your number you know, like you're a native of one of the countries in Africa, and your number is 8,500. You see this bulletin and it says Africa 10,000. So, you know, what does this mean? So this means that, you know, you will be able to apply for the green card in October, because your number, you know, so basically if you have a number that is 10,000 or lower, you'll be able to file in October. You know, let's say that your number for Africa is, you know, 15,000. So, you know, unfortunately, you wouldn't be able to file in October. But then in mid-October, the government will release a new bulletin for November. And let's say that the number for November is 17,000. So that means that you would be able to file in November. So, what this really means is that, if your case number is kind of like low, or like the lower your case number is, the better it is, because the earlier in the process you'll be able to file, and the higher the chance is that, like the government will be able to adjudicate and approve the green card in time. Because what's important with the DV green cards is that they have to be all DV green cards have to be approved by September 30. So, like if you are either like not able to file before September 30, or like let's say that you had the interview, but for some reason, the case is still pending, and the government is not able to approve it before September 30, that would mean that unfortunately, like after September 30, they would no longer be able to approve it, because that's when the fiscal year you were selected for would end. And then, so you just wouldn't get the green card in time. So basically the kind of like the lower number you have, the higher the chance is to, to actually be able to get the green card. And, like when you look at the, you can go on a government website and kind of like see the visa bulletins for previous years. But basically, like every month, the numbers will increase. Some months the numbers may kind of like really only increase, a couple hundred, or really kind of like stay the same. So, but you just kind of like have to, the important thing is, to just kind of like keep an eye on the visa bulletin. And, as soon as you are able to file, file the application. So it gives you kind of like sufficient time, or, to be able to get that approved. And really, like we kind of like went through that one example for Africa, but the principle is really the same for all the other, like Asia, Europe, like it would be the same. One thing to keep in mind is, like you see these countries, so you see Africa, but then like it says like except Algeria, Egypt, Morocco. So those countries have their specific numbers. So like if you're a native of one of those countries, you would have to keep an eye on those specific numbers. Perfect. And so, like how can you apply for the diversity visa lottery green card? So there are basically two options. One is like, let's say that you are living abroad, then really your only option would be to apply for the green card at a US consulate abroad. So the first step, when applying through the consulate would be to submit the DS-260 form. And, this is really like one of the most common questions we get about the DV, is, like, so after you get selected, after you get the notice, and after you are notified and aware that you are able to submit in May, many people ask, and you will be able to basically like submit the DS-260 form like immediately after. And many people ask us, like, oh, like, should I submit it kind of like immediately, or when should I submit the form? So I would say like this would be, sometimes it is kind of like a strategic decision. I would say in most cases you may submit it kind of like, early in the process, or like as soon as possible after you were notified that you were selected. But like, let's say that you live outside the US, but like you have, for example, you have a business in the US, and you come, like every couple months on a B1 visa to kind of check on the business. So I would say in that case, it may be kind of like a strategic decision to perhaps wait with submission of the DS-260, and submit it kind of like later in the process once your case number or your visa number is current, just because, like after you submit the DS-260, and if the CBP kind of like sees it in the system, like they may ask, like if you plan to apply for the green card, and they may kind of question you about it. There is an argument to be made that, like just submission of the DS-260 doesn't mean that you will actually apply for a green card. But I would say like if you are someone who kind of like travels back and forth, in certain cases it may be better to perhaps wait a little bit and submit it closer to the time, like when your number is current. But like, let's say that you are someone who just lives outside the US, you have no intent to go to the US, to travel to the US in the next like year, then it may be, it may be good to submit it kind of like early in the process. So it's submitted. Then, for the diversity visa green card, you will have to submit and bring to the interview certain documents, these documents. So you will have to bring the originals to the interview and also photocopies. The documents are, listed on the government website. Usually it's your birth certificate. So, this is really important because if you are submitting as a native of certain country, then you will have to submit a birth certificate kind of like issued from that country. So it'll be the birth certificate. Then you will have to bring a police certificate, just kind of showing that you don't have any criminal history. If you do have any criminal record, then, it may definitely be good to kind of like discuss this with an immigration attorney, just to kind of assess whether, that doesn't make you inadmissible to the US. But if it doesn't, then, you would have to bring like court documents, arrest documents to the interview. If you served in military, you'll have to bring the military records. And then if you are married and if you have children, then you will have to bring the original marriage certificate and birth certificates for your children. So, once your number, if you are applying at a consulate, in the past, it was the case that you had to submit by email certain documents to the Kentucky Consular Center. Then they would kind of review the documents. And then once the number was current, the consulate would schedule your interview. Recently, the government kind of changed this process. And now like all the documents are being submitted to the consulate. So once your number is current, the consulate would schedule your interview. They would send you kind of interview instructions. You should closely review those because, certain countries, they request some additional documents on top of the ones I mentioned. You will also have to complete your medical exam before an interview. And then again, this would kind of be in the instructions the consulate send you or on the consular website. Generally, how this works is that you would go to one of the doctors, that were approved by the consulate, and then you would complete a medical exam and then bring, or, like in some countries, the doctors kind of like mail the medical exam directly to the consulate. But that's kind of like one thing to keep in mind is that you do have to complete the medical exam before the interview. And then again, you would have to bring the original documents and then copies. If any of the documents are not in English, you have to get certified translations as well. You will have to pay at the interview, you will have to pay a fee of $330 per person for the diversity visa. And then, let's say that you are applying and your spouse and children are applying as well. Generally all applicants have to attend the interview. What happens at the interview, the officer will kind of let you know the outcome of the interview. So, so if they approve the visas, they will keep your passports, and then they will issue the immigrant visas to the passports. On the immigrant visa, so let's say that it was approved, they issued the visas, then you will have to enter the US. The visa is usually valid for 6 months, so you will have to come to the US during the validity period of the visa. And then before you come to the US, there is one important thing to do. And usually kind of like the consulate will also give you instructions about this, but you will have to pay the fee for the physical green card and kind of like apply for the green card. And so this is usually, this has to be done like while you are outside the US. And then when you come to the US on the immigrant visa, then eventually, once USCIS approves the green cards, then they will mail you the green cards in mail. But that's kind of like one thing to keep in mind is that the consulate itself, they will just issue you the immigrant visa, and then USCIS will mail you the actual green card, once you come to the US. And so this was, applying for a DV through the consulate processing. And now let's discuss kind of like the application procedure through adjustment of status. So, this is really only an option for someone who is currently living in the US on some other kind of like more like long-term visa. So like, let's say like an E1, E2, H1B, L visa or O visa. So let's say that you have one of those visas, you are living in the US, and then you were selected in the DV lottery. So you have two options. You always have the option to apply at a consulate, even if you are living in the US, but you also have an option to apply through adjustment of status. And this is basically a procedure that's done through USCIS instead of a consulate abroad. So, one thing to keep in mind here is that like just because you were selected in the diversity visa lottery, like that doesn't really give you like a status or a permission to stay in the US. So you have to check your I-94. You have to maintain your status in the US until you are able to file the adjustment of status application, with USCIS. The benefit of this procedure is that you can stay in the US, during the whole process. So like, let's say that you are in the US on an E2 investor visa, your I-94 is valid for, like 2 additional years. And then you apply for adjustment of status because you were selected. You could just kind of stay in the US, keep running the company, and then, like once USCIS approves the green cards and mail you the green cards, then, like your status would change from E2 to, green card holder. But the advantage really is that you'll be able to kind of stay in the US and, on the underlying status, and then apply for the green card from the US. The one downside of this is that, if you're applying at a consulate, you only have to pay that $330. If you're applying with USCIS, you still have to pay the $330, but you also have to pay kind of like a fee for the adjustment of status petition, which is around like 1,400 for an adult. And then if you want to apply for a work and travel authorization, those would be additional fees that are around like a few $100s. So the process is just like the filing fees are higher than if you're applying at a consulate. One advantage of the adjustment of status procedure is that there are kind of like better options available to expedite the process. So like, let's say that your case number is really high, and you are only able to file the adjustment of status petition, like let's say in July and August. And, as I said, the case has to be approved before September 30. There are just kind of like better options available if like in case your case number is higher, if you are applying through USCIS versus when you are applying at a consulate. So, and we have done this in the past, like we had cases where the number was high and we were only able to file like beginning of August, and we still, those cases still got approved in time. So what you can do is, you can kind of send, like when you file the petition, just kind of like make it clear to the USCIS that this is a time-sensitive application, and it has to be adjudicated before September 30. You can send, like follow-up correspondence to USCIS, again, just kind of like notifying them that this is time-sensitive, it has to be adjudicated before September 30. But what has really been helpful in these cases is to kind of reach out to your local congressional, use your local congressional kind of person, reach out to their team and kind of like notify them of the situation. And they have been able to kind of like get these cases expedited in many cases. So it's really, really helpful. Unfortunately, like you cannot, the congressional assistants, they will not help you if your case is pending at a consulate. And like, let's say that it's pending at a consulate and, it's really time sensitive, like you can always send emails to the consulate, but it's not the congressional assistant, they're really helpful in these types of cases. So if your case number is high, this is a great kind of resource to turn into if you're in this situation. And if your adjustment of status petition is approved, then USCIS will mail you the actual green card in mail. And now, you know, like, let's just briefly go over, you know, like what happens after you get, you know, you get the green card. So usually the green card would be valid for a period of 10 years. And, you know, as a green card holder, you have certain obligations, or they're just like certain things you should keep in mind to maintain your status in the US. So one of them is that every time you move in the US, you have to report the change of address to USCIS. So you will have to file form, or it can be filed online, where you will just list, you know, like information like your name, the old address, new address. But this is, you know, like many people don't realize it, but it's just kind of like a really important thing. You always kind of like have to keep the government and USCIS informed when you change address. So you do have to do this. Then, you know, another thing to keep in mind is that you must file your income taxes in the US and report your income to the IRS and state taxing authorities. And you know, on the tax returns, it's also important to kind of reflect your you know, your immigration status. So you'll have to file them, you know, and kind of like reflect that you are lawful permanent resident in the US. You know, of course, you must obey all laws of the US, state, and localities. If you are, one important thing is if you are a male and you are between the ages of 18 to 25, you must register for selective service. This is extremely important. You know, some people forget about this, but then when you are applying for citizenship, you know, like you do have to submit evidence that you registered for this. So it's really important, you know, like if you fall under you know, if you're male and fall under kind of like in the age group, it's really important that you do register for the selective service, just because you could then have issues, you know, when you are applying for the citizenship. And then really, you know, the really important thing is that, you know, like if you are a green card holder, you know, you know, you should keep the US should be kind of like your primary residence. So like anytime that you kind of like travel and spend you know, like a long time abroad, you know, like you could have kind of like issues at the border. The CBP could give you hard time potentially if they think that you you know, like you abandoned your kind of your US residence. And really, you know, like anytime you know that, you know, like for personal or kind of employment reasons, like if you know that you have to travel abroad and you plan to stay there, you know, like 1 year or more, you should, you know, like you should reach out to an immigration attorney, or you should file for a re-entry permit. So, you know, because if you don't, then you plan to kind of like come back to the US, you could definitely have kind of issues at the border. So that's really important. Perfect. Yeah, so let's see if we have any questions. I don't think so. Yeah, so it was great session. Thank you so much, Jiyae, and thank you so much, everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you, Michaela.